Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. This is Moyna Bass Fishes. I am Jim Moyna, professional bass fisherman. In this video, we are going to discuss my strategies for the 2024 Champions Tour Championship Tournament held yesterday on Lake Minnewaska, because it's was and it's in the past. This would be in the Glenwood, Starbuck area of Minnesota. It's a lake that's shaped like a pickle, and it's got a ton of largemouth, and it's got a handful of smallmouth. And this is a tournament style where you catch it, you wait in the boat with a marshal or a boat official, and then you release it right there. And every fish, 1 pound or greater, counts towards your total. So I ended up scoring 39 bass in this tournament. There's 32 competitors in this championship. I scored 39 bass that weighed like 61 pounds or so, right in there. And that was good for 23rd place out of 32. It was, guys were catching them left and right and center, middle, up, down. They were catching them like mad. So here's how, and my strategy, I had a good strategy. I really did. And I'll just tell you what my strategy was. I knew that to finish in the top 5 and win this tournament, I knew I was going to have to find one of these big schools of bass, largemouth, that are there. There's always a few big schools of largemouth in this lake somewhere. Where they are exactly changes, but that's what I had to find. I'd only been to this lake one other time. That was for a Champions Tour regular season tournament. In fact, it was my very first Champions Tour tournament I ever fished. And this the only time I've been there, but practicing for that tournament, I found one of these mega schools. And unfortunately, there was another tournament the same day, and they went out an hour before us. This still is painful. They went an hour before us, and when I got to my spot, the gentleman there say to me, "Ah, Moyne, you should have been here an hour ago because we've caught 50." So I'm like, great. And I asked them, well, can I fish here a little bit? And they're like, sure, you can fish here. And I still caught like 6 or 7. But so I knew, that told me that, that's what I knew I had to find. I had to find, and not only that, the winner of that tournament was Seth Fighter that year, and he got on one of these big schools. So I knew that was the whole key for winning this tournament. It's not a 5 biggest fish tournament. It's just get on one of these giant schools, catch them all, and freaking watch the register just go nuts. So anyways, we get 1 day of practice where we can fish. We can fish from 7 till 4. And I hadn't been on this lake since, 7, 8 years ago when I had that tournament. And so we can fish from 7 to 4, and then the second day of practice, we don't even get to fish. We can't have rods on the deck. We can just run our sonar. So anyways, the first place I pull up to is a place that I regret not fishing from 7 years ago, because I remember finding fish there and then I never got to it in the tournament. So I go there. It's right away. It's it's the first place I check out. I drop my Minn Kota Ultrex into the water. Well, I don't drop it. I ease it into the water, and my Lowrance Active Target starts sending me signals, and instantly I'm like, and I'm kind of on the outer fringe of the weeds. And instantly I'm like, well, God, I think that's a fish right there. I pick up my jig, my all-terrain tackle jig, AT jig, flip it over to this fish I see, like in a little, there's weed here, there's some weeds here, clumps here, weeds clear here, and I see this fish signal about 5 feet off the bottom. I flip it over there, and this largemouth mauls my jig, and I land it. And I'm like, first flip. I'm like, well, that's pretty cool. So I unhook it, and it's relatively calm, and I just kind of rotate the motor around, and I see another image, and I flip over there, nothing, rotate it around, see another image, flip to it, catch that one. And it was like, the first one was like 1.5 pounds, this one was the same thing. So I'm like, oh my God, well, this is a good spot. So then I fish around another bit, and I've dropped a waypoint on my Lowrance, obviously. And I'm fishing around a little bit, not much more happening until about 10 minutes later. Now I'm about 30 yards from my initial waypoint, and I see some more fish signals, like multiple. Throw down there, shake them off. Then I spin the unit a little bit. Oh, there's more signals. Pitch over there, shake the biters off. Then I move a little bit, and all of a sudden I see one signal. Drop your jig down, and this is a jig that's with the hook cut off, because by now I'm fishing, the first two I caught. Now I'm fishing with a jig with no hook, because I don't want to hurt these fish. I want to be as fresh as possible for tournament time. So I drop it down on this one fish, and he's kind of being reluctant. And all of a sudden, like a whole herd of fish, like, ease out of this weed clump, and one mauls my jig, and I shake that one off. So now I'm like, all right, so I put down that jig, I pick up one with a hook, because I just have to see what the hell this herd is all about. And I drop it down there, instantly one mauls it, I reel it in, it's a 2.5 pound largemouth. So now I'm like, and then I scope around, and then I rotate the scope around, and I'm seeing fish over here, I'm seeing fish over there. And honest to God, this is exactly what I have in mind of trying to find. And I'm like, jacked. And now it's just, so now I got a depth. I've got a depth, because I'm gonna look everywhere in the rest of this lake that I can at that depth and try to find what I just found. Because here's one school. I know there's gonna be more groups like this in this lake. So that's what I did all the rest of the day. Spent all my time in, and that particular school was in 16 feet. So I spent a lot of time in 15 to 17 feet all the rest of the day trying to connect with a school like that, and I never did. I'd find single fish here, maybe two there, but I never found that big school. So so that was the first day of fishing. So now the second day of practice, 7 till noon, we can just sonar all day. So what I did is I just put my Lowrance active target to work, and was just hoping to try to find fish with it. And I put down some dots, put down some marks of of fish that I saw. The problem is, I don't know if they're bass, I don't know if they're big crappies, I don't know if they're walleyes. With certainty, I don't. I should have brought my AquaView camera. This was the perfect situation for an AquaView camera, because if you can't fish, at least you can drop a camera down and maybe see, maybe confirm or deny what kind of species I'm looking at. So not having my AquaView camera was a major mistake. And it was in my camper on shore. I had every intention to bring it, and I just forgot, and I decided that I wasn't going to take the time to run all the way back to to the boat landing, and then it was about a 5-minute walk to my camper in my campground. So it would have been like a half hour lost. Easily, at least a half hour. So I decided not to do it. Still might have been, it might have been worth it to do it, and I didn't. Even with the lost time. So anyhow, so now come tournament day, there's a lake split. You fish one half in the morning, you fish the other half in the afternoon. Of course, I'm all full of anxiety and just uncertainty, wondering if somebody's going to pull up on that spot before I get there tournament morning. But sure enough, I go there. Nobody's there when I get there. Nobody comes to want to join me fishing there. I have this school all to myself. And I'm jacked. I'm just like so excited. I dropped the Lowrance or the Ultrix, Minn Kota Ultrix into the water. And we can't start fishing till 7, and it's probably like 6:55. So, and my Lowrance active target starts sending me the signals, and I'm scanning around. And I pulled up shy of the waypoint, because I knew I had 5 minutes, so I was going to just kind of ease my way and use the Lowrance active target to kind of just scan what was going on. I never scanned one fish. And so I was like, well, maybe they're just buried in the weed clumps. We did have a big storm the evening before, and then another storm come through at about 4 a.m. So I was thinking, well, maybe this has got them just glued to the bottom or something, or they're just buried up in these weeds and you just can't see them. 7 a.m. hits, and I can start casting, and I'm not casting at any fish signals because I'm not seeing any. So I just start casting at weed clumps, and I'm all over the waypoint, and I'm coming up with nothing. And at a certain point, you realize these fish aren't here. So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to give up on this school, because obviously, they didn't swim across the lake. They didn't swim, who knows where they're at. So then I dug in and just started fishing, moving in shallower into the heavier weeds, because where I found these fish were out in the kind of the intermediate to sparse weeds. That's where they were in practice, but up inside was a lot heavier coontail and stuff. So I spent my time moving in and out, moving laterally down the weed line, each way, in and out. And like a half hour gone by, and I still hadn't had a fish. I'd watched some guys off in the distance. You can tell when he catches one because the marshal stands up, and you can see what it looks like when somebody's weighing a fish. So I'm just like, you got to be kidding me. And as it turns out, I never could relocate this school. So that whole morning session, what I did find was, when I did go really shallow, in this area where the school was, when I went shallower, as far all the way up to like 10 feet, that's where I could start catching some. But it was not like a big school of fish. It was like one here, one there, and they ran small. I mean, I'm catching like 14 ounces to 1.5 pounders. And it's not easy, is what other guys are experiencing. It's not easy as sitting on a school making one cast over and over again to a school. And by the end of the first period, the first half, and periodically I'd bounce back out to the deep edge, and just check and look, and it just wasn't happening. So by the end of the first session, the morning session, I was in 27th place. I think I had about, 17 or 18 bass, something like that. Disappointing, so disappointing. But there's an afternoon session, and I know I can still make a check at least. And by the way, the leader had 90 pounds. They caught like 60 fish or something ridiculous like that. All out of one school, of course. Um, so, I mean, I'm disappointed. I'm at, I'm, I'm sitting there at lunch break. They give us free lunch. Thank you, by the way. Uh, and oh gosh, the place that hosted us was called the Water's Edge. I really like that place. It's right on the lake, and we had our banquet there the night before. They made these ribs that were so good. Some of the best ribs I've ever had. And I went to Rib Fest at Mystic Lake Casino in Shakopee earlier this year to sample some of the best ribs around, and these ribs were so good up there at Water's Edge, and the fried chicken was really good. Um, Baked potato. Well, it was a baked potato, just like any other baked potato. And but anyhow, um, back to the fishing. We had lunch there at the Water's Edge. It was well, whatever. It was decent lunch. But those ribs, man, I want those ribs again. Anyhow, enough of the rib talk. So I'm sitting there at lunch, and I'm eating alone because I'm pissed. I'm frustrated, and just I'm just like, I ain't gonna let this happen to me. I'm gonna get out there and just smash them the second half because I'm mad. I'm pissed. I'm not gonna let this happen. And I knew to get back into a good money spot, I knew I had to land on one of these big schools of fish. So the strategy was, there was one place I wanted to check where I did catch some fish during the practice day where we could fish. I wanted to go there. And then it was a matter of going to check a bunch of the waypoints that I dropped during our sonar only day. So that's what I did. So the first place I went to was a place where I caught some fish, and it actually was producing fish, but it wasn't a type of place where you could just hold your boat and make one cast here. I'd catch one here, move the boat a little bit, catch one there, move the boat a little bit, catch one there, maybe catch two there. In fact, I caught three. I caught three without moving the boat at one point. But I was starting to make the climb. I was starting to reel in. And I got to a point where I moved up to 19th. But the problem was that area, I taxed out that area. I was like, the area where I caught the three without moving the boat, that was like the juice. And then as I moved around that area and away from it, it was getting to be more of a one here, one there. 15 minutes goes by, I catch another one. So now I wasn't gaining any more ground. I moved up to 19th. I wasn't gaining any more ground. I think I pulled into with like 9 pounds of the last money spot. But I hit the wall. So then I'm like, okay, I'll start running some of these waypoints I dropped from my sonar session. And the first place I go to, I catch one. Didn't take too long. But then it was, fish, fish, fish. And then, I caught another one. And then fish and fish and fish and fish. And then catch another one. But I wasn't making up on any ground because I wasn't catching them faster than the other guys. I wasn't finding that group of fish where I could hold the boat and make a certain cast and catch multiple fish. And that's pretty much how the rest of the afternoon played out. Just hitting little droughts of non-activity and then catching a single fish. And that's how the day played out. So I ended up 23rd place out of 32. Very disappointed. I had the right strategy because the guys that did well found these schools And the guy that won the tournament, interesting enough, congratulations, Kyle Schuda. Interesting enough, the school he found in practice moved. He said he had to go down the weed line 100 yards. I don't know. Did he say 100 yards? It was a ways. And then he finally reconnected with the school, and that's how he weighed 90 pounds in the first half. So, and then other guys that did extremely well, you know, they had spots where they could hold their boat and catch fish in one. You hold their boat in one place and catch fish after fish after fish. It's not how it worked for me. I knew that's what had to be done. I had the right. I mean, my baits caught fish. I liked the baits, and it came down to 2 baits for me. I'll show you what they are. Again, it's this. This is the same jig I used at Leech Lake. It's an all-terrain tackle AT jig, and here's what I'll say. At Leech Lake and at Minnewaska, I never lost a fish. Any fish I hooked on this jig, I never lost. Now, I trim the weed guard thinner when I'm fishing weeds. That's pretty thin, okay? It's a lot thinner. So I trim that down so it flexes easier. I don't like, when I practice fishing, I'll use it with a fold weed guard because it's less likely to snag, especially if I'm practicing woody cover. But in weed cover, you can really thin it down, and that's part of the key. But I probably at Leech Lake I probably caught I don't know, a dozen fish out of the 2 days when I was largemouth fishing. A dozen, you know, that's including keepers and non-keepers. Probably caught a dozen or so on that. Didn't lose one. And then the good thing about Minnewaska was I never lost a fish. I scored 39 bass. Not one came off the hook. Every bass I set the hook on and was hooked after I set the hook. And that was pretty much all of them. There was like maybe 2 bites during the day where I felt like a little thump and I'd pull back and the jig trailer would be pulled off or whatever. But it was just awesome. That kind of a hooking percentage is what I dream of. I mean, 39 freaking hookups and not one comes off. That's just, and half the fish I weighed at least were on this bait right here. And that's the Billy Rub Flutter Craw. Billy Rub's baits comes in that package. The all-terrain tackle packages look like this. This jig skirt is an aftermarket jig skirt that I really like. So that's that. Then the other bait that I used out there in Minnewaska was a drop shot rig. That is a Billy Rub's Tricky D, which is my go-to straight worm. They that worked really well. My leader length, what is that? You know, I didn't play around with leader length. That's about a 12, 13 inch, maybe 14 at the most leader length. 2-aught hook. I fish it on this rig right here. It's not a finesse because I'm flipping it in heavier weeds than that. So it's not a finesse type drop shot. The main line on that is like 16 pound fluorocarbon, and the leader is 12 pound fluorocarbon. And then here's something I do. I tie a little swivel in there. That because when you're flipping, especially straight tail worms, a lot of cases, when you're flipping that, a lot of times the straight tail worm might spin like this as it goes down, and that'll twist the heck out of your line. So that's why I throw that swivel in there, and that eliminates that line twist. So I'll do that on that rig, or even some of my finesse rigs if I'm and that's when you're Texas rigging. When you Texas rig, which I was doing, when you Texas Texas rigging means, it's rigged basically like that. That's when that spinning is more apt to happen. Now, if you just do a nose hook, you don't get that spin so much, so you don't have to worry about that swivel. But if I'm Texas rigging, seems when that swivel seems to be necessary. Okay, all right, well, that is my Minnewaska report. Just not what I was after. When you make those championships, man, you want to frickin' hit that pay dirt. And I didn't. Not even close. Strategy was intact. Good strategy. Just didn't find them. That school that left me. The one regret I have is I should have went farther down the weed line the one direction. I went quite a ways one way and just a little bit ways the other way. And by that I mean like 50 yards. I should have just freaking well, I don't know what I should have done. It's all hindsight. Yeah, in hindsight, I know what I should have done. I should have just dropped the trolling motor and fish until the end of the period off of that deep weed edge until I found them. But see, they can suck into that heavier vegetation too. That's the other thing they can do. They can pull in. Because it wasn't much of a depth change. The outer sparse stuff was like 16, 17, and then to get into the little bit thicker stuff, you're only going shallower by about a foot. That's nothing. So, all right, over and out.